The first thing they gave me was the key. It was brass, heavy, and worn smooth on one side from decades of fingers. It opened the door to the white oak shed, a low, cinder block building squatting under the dense canopy of hemlock and poplar at the end of a 3-mile gravel service road. My new home for the next 3 nights a week. I was here for the silence, for the distance, and because the Forest Service was the only place that would hire a man with a limp and a dishonorable discharge, no questions asked, so long as he could work alone. The pay was enough to keep the debtors from calling for now. Supervisor Dern met me at the district office, a man carved from gristle and old timber. He didn't shake my hand, just looked me over once, his eyes the color of river stone. "White oak shed," he said, his voice a low rasp. "Dispatch for Sector 7. Your job is to listen, log, and relay. Nothing more. You are not a first responder. You are a switchboard with a heartbeat." He handed me a thick, 3-ring binder. "Your predecessor left you that. Read it. The rules are in the front. Memorize them." The drive in was a slow, twisting descent into a green twilight. The shed looked exactly as described. 1 room, 20 by 15 feet. A heavy-duty radio console dominated one wall, its dials and switches under a plexiglass cover. A single cot. A desk bolted to the floor. A map of the sector pinned to corkboard, dotted with colored pins and cryptic symbols. The windows were small, high, and reinforced with wire mesh. The door was solid steel with 3 deadbolts. It felt less like a ranger station and more like a bunker. I stowed my gear in the footlocker. The air inside was cold and smelled of damp concrete and ozone from old electronics. At precisely 6:45 p.m., as the last of the murky daylight bled from the sky, I unlocked the radio console. The logbook lay next to it, open to a fresh page, and beneath it, typed on a sheet of yellowed paper, were the rules, not guidelines. Rules, numbered, precise. 1. Upon arrival, inventory. The supply locker, 4 gallons of distilled water, 12 highway flares, 1 sealed medical kit, 1 roll of duct tape, 1 container of table salt, full, 1 air horn, 1 handheld spotlight, charged. Log any discrepancy immediately on Channel 9. Then do not use Channel 9 again until the discrepancy is resolved verbally by day shift command. 2. At 7 p.m. sharp, broadcast the check-in sequence on Channel 2. White Oak, secure. Sector 7, nominal. Await the double-click acknowledgement from base. If no acknowledgement is received within 30 seconds, repeat the sequence once. If still no acknowledgement, proceed to Rule 3. 3. In the event of failed check-in, seal the door perimeter with 2 continuous strips of duct tape, top and bottom. Do not use the salt. Remain at the console. Switch to Channel 5 and monitor only. Do not broadcast on Channel 5 unless you observe a steady red light on the ridge path motion. Sensor. That broadcast is only. Sensor tripped. White Oak. Then resume silence. 4. Between the hours of 9 p.m. and 4 a.m., do not acknowledge any broadcast that uses your personal name. Base communications will use your call sign, White Oak only. 5. The tree line south of the shed is never closer than 52 paces from the front step. If you measure it and count fewer than 52 paces, do not approach the tree line. Return to the shed, lock the door, and broadcast on Channel 2. Request perimeter confirmation. Await the double click. 6. A maintenance patrol may pass the shed between the hours of 10 p.m. and midnight. They will not knock. They will not signal. If you hear footsteps or see shadows crossing the window, do not greet them. Do not shine a light on them. Their jackets will have a red stripe on the sleeve. If a jacket lacks the red stripe, see Rule 10. 7. The handheld spotlight is to be pointed south at the tree line for exactly 60 seconds at 1:15 a.m. every night. Do not sweep the beam. Do not linger after 60 seconds. Turn it off regardless of what you see illuminated. 8. If you hear crying that resembles a human infant, it is a fisher cat. Do not investigate. Turn up the radio static to drown it out. 9. The map on the wall is correct. If you observe a new trail, stream, or landmark on the console, SC topographic display that does not appear on the wall map, ignore the display. Rely on the paper map. 10. In the event of a direct visual encounter with an anomalous entity, defined as humanoid figure with inconsistent silhouette, animal moving with broken or reversed articulation, or any person claiming to be a lost hiker between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Do not make eye contact. Retreat to the shed if outside. If inside, turn off all interior lights except the radio console lamp. Take the air horn, sound 1 3-second blast. Then state clearly, "This area is closed." Proceed to the service road. Do not repeat yourself. 11. The supply locker must remain locked from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. If you find it open, do not touch anything inside. Secure the shed door with the salt line across the threshold. Monitor Channel 5 in silence until dawn. 12. You may take bathroom breaks outside using the designated latrine trench 30 paces north of the shed. Carry the spotlight. The trip must not exceed 5 minutes. If you feel watched or hear your name whispered, finish immediately and return. Do not run. 13. At 4 a.m., broadcast White Oak, standing by for dawn. You will receive a single-click acknowledgement. This is your signal to begin the post-dawn inventory. The shift ends at 6 a.m. 14. Never, under any circumstances, go into the ravine marked on the map as Whisper Draw. Radio signals do not return from Whisper Draw. I read them twice. My military mind categorized them: perimeter security, communication protocols, psychological ops countermeasures. Bizarre but structured, I rationalized them as outdated, holdovers from some long ago incident, now ossified into ritual. Maybe a ranger got lost once. Maybe there were problems with poachers. It didn't matter. My job was to follow orders. The first night was a study in routine. At 7 p.m., I keyed the mic. White Oak, secure. Sector 7, nominal. The double click came back 20 seconds later, crisp and clear. I logged it. I counted the paces to the southern tree line, 52 exactly. The forest was a wall of blackness, swallowing the beam of my flashlight whole. I felt the weight of being alone, but it was a familiar weight. The first anomaly happened at 9:22 p.m. The radio crackled on Channel 3, a traffic channel mostly used by logging crews who were long gone for the day. A voice, male, strained, came through. "Hey, is anyone on? This is Sam Driscoll. I've taken a fall off the Laurel Branch Trail. I think my leg's broken. Can anyone hear me?" My hand went to the mic. Standard distress call. Protocol was to respond, get coordinates, relay to base. But Rule 4 glowed in my mind. Between the hours of 9 p.m. and 4 a.m., do not acknowledge any broadcast that uses your personal name. The voice hadn't used my name, but it had used a name, Sam Driscoll. I scanned the duty roster pinned next to the map. No Sam Driscoll. I waited. "Please," the voice crackled, a sob edging into the transmission. "My wife, Jenny, she's waiting at the campground. Tell her I'm sorry. A specific detail. A human detail." My fingers tightened. This could be real. The console had a triangulation function. I could ping his signal, get a rough location. I reached for the controls. Then I stopped. Rule 9. The map on the wall is correct. I looked at the paper map. Laurel Branch Trail was in Sector 4. Not my sector, but more than that. According to the faded, typed legend in the corner, Laurel Branch Trail had been decommissioned and rerouted 5 years ago. The old path was now marked with a red X. It terminated at the edge of Whisper Draw. I took my hand off the console. I did not acknowledge. I switched channel 3 to receive only and turned the volume down to a whisper. At 1:15 a.m., I performed the spotlight ritual. The powerful beam cut through the night, painting the trunks of the oaks and poplars in stark relief. For 55 seconds, nothing. Then, at the edge of the light's reach, something moved. It was low to the ground, the size of a large dog, but its gait was all wrong. It didn't bound or slink. It moved in a series of stiff, stuttering jerks, like a broken puppet. Its head was too large. I held the beam steady, my thumb on the timer. 58 seconds. 59. The thing stopped. It seemed to turn, not its whole body, but its head in a way that suggested a neck with too many joints. It looked directly into the light. 60 seconds. I snapped the spotlight off. The afterimage burned in my vision, the silhouette of something that was not a dog, not a bear, standing perfectly, still in the absolute dark. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had followed the rule. I had not swept the beam. I had not lingered. I returned to the console, my hands cold. I logged the event. 1:15 a.m. Standard perimeter light sweep conducted. No activity. The lie felt like a shield. The second night, it rained. A cold, relentless drizzle that turned the world into a smear of grays and made the radio channels hum with static. My check-in was acknowledged. The paces to the tree line were still 52, though the mud tried to suck my boots down. The shed felt even smaller, a metal coffin in the vast, dripping lung of the forest. Just after 11 p.m., I heard the footsteps. They came from the north side, a slow, measured crunch on the gravel path that led to the latrine. Rule 6 flashed in my mind. A maintenance patrol may pass. They will not knock. I sat perfectly still at the console, my pen frozen above the logbook. The footsteps stopped outside the door. I held my breath. I could see a shadow through the slim gap at the bottom of the door, blocking the faint light from my console. Then the footsteps moved on, continuing past the shed and fading into the rain. I let out a slow breath. I had complied. I had not greeted them. I waited a full 5 minutes, then risked a glance out the high, mesh-reinforced window. The path was empty, but illuminated in the puddle by the step was a footprint. It was a boot print, deep and clear, and from its edge, a long, dragging scrape mark led away, as if something without a foot had been pulled alongside the walker. I did not log it. The temptation came on the third night, in the dead hours between 2 and 3 a.m. The rain had stopped, leaving a crystalline silence broken only by the drip of water from the roof. I was fighting sleep, tracing the contour lines on the paper map to stay awake, when the radio on channel 2, my primary channel, squelched. A voice I knew came through. It was my sister, Mari. Her voice was thick with tears, trembling with a fear I'd heard only once before, when she'd called me from a roadside after her car accident. John, are you there? Please, oh God, please pick up. Every muscle in my body went rigid. Mari didn't know where I was. She didn't have this frequency This was impossible. John, it's so dark. I'm in the woods. I came to find you. I thought you were hurt, but now I'm lost. I hear something. Please. The raw terror in her voice was a fishhook in my chest. My hand shot toward the mic. My mouth was already forming her name. This wasn't a random hiker. This was Mary. Rule 4 screamed in my head. Do not acknowledge any broadcast that uses your personal name. But this was different. This was targeted. This was a violation of reality itself. What if, by some insane coincidence, she was out there? What if she'd tracked me down, worried about her screw-up brother? Her transmission dissolved into sobs, then a sharp, terrified gasp. It's here. John, help him. The channel went to static. I was on my feet, the chair screeching behind me. I stared at the radio, my breath coming in short, sharp pants. The logical part of my brain, the part trained by the army and hardened by disappointment, wrestled with the primal part. The rules were clear. The rules were my only armor. But it was Mari. I grabbed the handheld spotlight, my fingers fumbling on the switch. I went to the door, my hand on the deadbolt. I would go out. I would sweep the beam and call for her. Just a quick look, 30 seconds. My other hand rested on the cold steel of the door. Rule 10. Any person claiming to be a lost hiker between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. do not make eye contact. And Rule 14, looming over all of them. Never, under any circumstances, go into the ravine marked on the map as Whisper Draw. I looked at the map. The signal, if it was even real, would have come from somewhere to the west. The terrain sloped down in that direction, towards the beginning of the draws and hollows that fed into Whisper Draw. I took my hand off the deadbolt. I walked back to the console, my legs unsteady. I did not touch the mic. I sat down, put my head in my hands, and listened to the hollow static for the next 2 hours, every nerve screaming that I had just condemned my sister to die. Dawn came, a slow, grudging light that did nothing to warm me. The 4 a.m. broadcast was a mechanical act. The single-click acknowledgement felt like a judgment. When Dern's truck rumbled up at 6:10 a.m., I was already packed, the shed immaculate, the logbook filled with bland, uninformative entries. He stepped inside, his eyes immediately scanning the tape on the doorframe, intact, the supply locker locked, the salt container full. He said nothing about my hollow eyes or the way my hands wouldn't stop a slight tremor. Your rookie week is over, he grunted, picking up the logbook. You followed the protocols. It wasn't a question. I just nodded. Good. He reached into his jacket and pulled out another sheet of paper. These are amendments. Add them to your binder. They clarify things. He left without another word. I looked at the new list. Amendments to White Oak Shed Operational Protocol. 1. Rule 4 is expanded. The name prohibition applies to any and all names, including those of family members, historical figures, or popular culture references. If a name is used, the broadcast is considered hostile mimicry. 2. The Maintenance Patrol, Rule 6, will always consist of 2 individuals. If you observe a single walker, or more than 2, implement Rule 10 immediately. 3. The 60-second spotlight scan, Rule 7, must now be preceded by a verbal countdown, spoken aloud but not broadcast, starting at 10 seconds. If the light flickers or dims during the countdown, abort the scan. Secure the shed per Rule 11. 4. The distance to the southern tree line, Rule 5, must be measured at 8 p.m. and again at midnight. Log both counts. A reduction of more than 3 paces triggers an immediate Channel 2 broadcast. perimeter compression. Stage 1, await instruction. 5, a new sensor has been installed at the 40-pace mark north of the shed on the path to the latrine. It is a pressure plate, not motion activated. It will trigger a silent alarm in the console, indicated by a green LED. If you must use the latrine and the green LED is illuminated, you may proceed. If the green LED is not illuminated, do not leave the shed. Use the emergency bucket. 6, all recorded cries, Rule 8, are fisher cats, without exception. 7, if you experience a personal auditory hallucination, a voice you recognize intimately, calling from just outside the door, you are to respond with the following phrase, spoken clearly toward the door. You are not cleared for this frequency. Do not open the door. Do not use the air horn. 8, whisper. Draw, Rule 14, is now a blanket term. Any communication, electronic or auditory, that seems to originate from a low-lying or geologically concave area is to be treated as originating from whisper draw. This includes streams, ravines, hollows, and dry creek beds. The amendments didn't soothe me. They tightened the vice. They acknowledged the threats were adaptive, that they probe for specific weaknesses. My weakness, my sister, had been probed. And now there was a rule for it. The next weeks settled into a grim rhythm. I became a creature of ritual. The 8 p.m. tree line count, 52 paces. The midnight count, 52 paces. The 1:15 a.m. spotlight scan, preceded by my whispered 10, 9, 8. I saw more things in the beam. A figure standing between 2 trees. So still it could have been a stump, but stumps have coats that hang wrong, as if empty. The jerking, broken animal again, closer this time, 30 yards out. I turned the light off at 60. I logged nothing. I heard the 2-person maintenance patrol twice more, their synchronized footsteps a comfort. I saw the red stripe on a sleeve once, a fleeting glimpse through the window. I never saw their faces. Then came the new dispatcher, a kid named Leo, fresh out of some community college natural resources program, all eager energy and naive questions. Dern dropped him off with me for a single observation shift. He was not to touch anything, just watch. Leo chattered about bird calls and soil composition. He found the rules binder and skimmed it, a smirk playing on his lips. Whoa, this is some serious X-Files stuff. You really do all this? Every night, I said, my voice flat. The salt? The duct tape? What is that for, ghosts? He laughed. It's procedure, I said, turning to the console. The check-in was coming up. At 7 p.m., I gave the call. The double-click responded. Leo watched, amused. At 9 p.m., the first test came. A voice on Channel 4. A woman, breathless. This is Ranger Kelly from Big Creek. We've got a possible heart attack on the Appalachian Trail Spur. Need immediate medical evac coordinates. It was a perfect mayday, using the right jargon, the right tone of controlled panic. Leo tensed, leaning forward. We gotta respond. I shook my head, pointing to the clock. 9:07 p.m., I made a slashing motion across my throat. But it's an emergency, he insisted, his hand hovering near the spare headset. Rule 4, I couldn't say it aloud, not with the radio active. I just glared at him and shook my head more violently. The voice came again, more desperate. Please, anyone, he's not breathing. Leo's face was pale. He was a good kid. He wanted to help. He reached for the headset jack. I grabbed his wrist. My grip was iron. No, I hissed. He stared at me, shocked, then yanked his arm back. The voice on the radio dissolved into static, then was gone. Leo didn't speak to me for an hour. He just sat in the corner, fuming. casting confused and angry glances my way. I felt a pang of sympathy, quickly buried. Didn't he understand the currency here? It wasn't about helping, it was about surviving. At 1:15 a.m., I did the spotlight countdown. 10, 9, 8. Leo watched, now more curious than scornful. I shone the beam. For the first 50 seconds, nothing. Then, at the edge of the light, we both saw it. A man. He was dressed in what looked like 1970s era hiking gear, wool pants, a thick plaid shirt. He was facing away from us, towards the deep woods. He was perfectly still. "Holy shit," Leo whispered. "Is that a hiker?" The man didn't move. 55, 56, I counted in my head, holding the beam steady. My knuckles were white on the spotlight. At 58 seconds, the man's head turned, not his body. His head rotated a full 180 degrees to face us. His body still pointed away. His features were in shadow, but the impossible contortion was clear. Leo gasped, a short, sharp intake of breath. 60 seconds. I killed the light. The darkness was absolute, and now felt filled with that still, twisted shape. What was that? Leo's voice was a tremulous whisper. "Rule 10, I said, my own voice surprisingly steady. I was already moving to the air horn on the wall. I hefted it, my finger on the trigger, facing the door. I stated the words clear and loud. "This area is closed. Proceed to the service road." Silence from outside. We waited. 5 minutes, 10. Leo didn't speak again. He just sat hunched in his chair, staring at the door. Finally, at around 2 a.m., he spoke, his voice small. "The rules. Yeah, they were real. They're the only thing that's real in here," I said. He left at dawn a changed young man. The smirk was gone, replaced by a haunted, hollow look I recognized in my own mirror. Dern collected him without a word. I didn't see Leo again. Rumor was he transferred to a desk job in town, citing family reasons. My own baptism by fire came during a siege. It wasn't a storm that caused it. It was a silence. It started on a calm, moonless night. My check-in at 7 p.m. got no double click. I waited 31 seconds. Nothing. My pulse, which had become a slow, metronomic thing, kicked up a notch. I repeated the call. White Oak, secure. Sector 7, nominal. Silence. Rule 3. I put the mic down. I got the duct tape. I sealed the top and bottom of the door. A precise, practiced motion. The sound of the tape tearing was obscenely loud. I switched to channel 5. The monitor light glowed a steady green. No signal. I sat. I watched the motion sensor status panel. All sensors, ridge path, service road, perimeter showed inactive. For 3 hours, nothing. The silence was a physical pressure. It was the silence of a vacuum, of a place waiting to be filled. I performed my rituals by rote. The 8 p.m. tree line count, 51 paces, a reduction of 1. I logged it. I did not broadcast. Rule 4, Amendment 4 required a reduction of more than 3. I waited. At 11 p.m., the footsteps returned, but they were wrong. A single set, slow and dragging, circling the shed, not the maintenance patrol. They circled once, twice. On the third pass, they stopped outside the door. A single, heavy knock. Do not acknowledge a second knock. The spirit of the rules whispered in my mind, though it wasn't written down. A second knock came, sharper. I remained silent, my eyes fixed on the door. Then a voice, my supervisor's voice, Dern's rasp. "Open up. There's a wildfire on the ridge. We need to evacuate the shed now." It was perfect. The urgency, the gravelly tone. My hand twitched toward the deadbolt. A wildfire was a clear and present danger that superseded everything. But Rule 6. The maintenance patrol were the only ones who might come. Dern would never come at night. He'd a radio. "Dern," the voice insisted, a note of strain entering it. "It's moving fast. Open the goddamn door." I closed my eyes. I thought of the amendments. If you experience a personal auditory hallucination, this wasn't a hallucination. This was a broadcast from right outside. But the principle was the same. It was a mimic. I spoke toward the door, my voice dry. "You are not cleared for this frequency." Silence. Then a sound, a long, slow scrape of something against the steel door, from top to bottom, like a single, enormous nail. Then nothing. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My hands were shaking. I checked the clock. Midnight. Time for the second tree line count. I shouldn't leave. The green LED for the north path pressure plate was dark. Amendment 5 was clear, but Rule 5 and its amendment were also clear. The count was mandatory. A reduction of more than 3 paces was a critical datum. I had to go out. This was the calculus of the rules. One protocol against another. I had to prioritize. The perimeter integrity was fundamental. I would be quick. Under 5 minutes. I grabbed the spotlight, checked its charge. I unsealed the bottom strip of duct tape, wincing at the sound. I unlocked the door, stepped out, and locked it behind me in one fluid motion. The night was colder than I expected, the air dead still. The beam of my spotlight was the only thing that existed. I walked south, counting. 1 pace, 2. The gravel underfoot was loud, 48 paces. The tree line was 4 paces closer. It loomed, a solid black mass. The beam hit the first line of trunks. Nothing moved. I turned and almost ran back to the shed, 48 paces, a reduction of 4. That triggered the amendment. I slammed the door, locked it, I resealed it with fresh tape. I went to the console, my breath fogging in the cold air. I keyed channel 2, perimeter compression, stage 1. I waited, no double click, no voice, just the hiss of dead air. Then, on channel 5, the red light for the ridge-path motion sensor began to blink. Steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Rule 3, broadcast on channel 5 only. Sensor tripped, white oak. I switched to channel 5, transmitted the exact phrase. Sensor tripped, white oak. I switched back to receive. The blinking red light on the panel continued. And then the green LED for the north path pressure plate flickered, then glowed steady. Something was on the path. Something had stepped on the plate. And inside the supply locker, there was a loud, metallic click. I stared at it. Rule 11. If you find it open, do not touch anything inside. Secure the shed door with the salt line. It was open. The lock had disengaged from the inside. This was the siege. The rules were being systematically tested, triggered in sequence to overwhelm me. Failed check-in, perimeter compression, sensor trip, locker breach. They were escalating. I grabbed the salt container. I broke the seal and poured a continuous, heavy line across the inside of the door threshold. I then took the duct tape and made an X over the locker door, not touching the handle. I returned to the console. The red sensor light was still blinking. The green pressure plate light was still on. And on channel 5, a new sound began to emerge from the static. It was the crying. The infant-like cry of a fisher cat. But it was wrong. It was too rhythmic, too melodic, almost like a lullaby. It was then that the emergency protocols, a section ID only skimmed, thinking I'd never need them, echoed in my memory. Dern had mentioned them once. When the quiet gets loud, he said. I opened the binder to the back. There were 3 rules, typed on a separate, red-bordered sheet. Emergency protocols. initiate when multiple primary rules are simultaneously challenged and communication with base is lost. 1. Blackout. Extinguish all light sources, including the console lamp. Use only the handheld spotlight for essential tasks and only in bursts of 10 seconds or less. 2. Sound discipline. You may use the air horn once per hour on the hour if you feel an imminent breach is likely. Do not speak. Breathe through your mouth. 3. The circle. Entities will often attempt to confuse by creating false spatial cues. Close your eyes. Count the number of distinct footsteps you hear, circling the structure. When the count reaches 30, open your eyes and immediately shine the spotlight on the southern window for 5 seconds. Repeat until dawn, or until base communication is restored. I took a deep, shuddering breath. This was it. I turned off the console lamp. The shed was plunged into a darkness so complete I could feel it on my skin. The only light was the faint, sickly green glow of the pressure plate LED and the blinking red of the sensor. The crying lullaby on channel 5 grew louder. I turned the volume to 0. The silence rushed back in, but it was a listening silence. Then the footsteps started again. Not one set, multiple. They circled the shed, a slow, shuffling procession. I could not tell how many. They didn't sound human. There was a wet, dragging component to them. I closed my eyes, as per Protocol 3. I began to count. 1, 2, 3. The steps were on gravel. 4, 5, 6 on dirt. 7, 8, 9. A scrape on the cinder block wall. 10. They were slow, deliberate. I lost track of time. My world shrank to the count. 21, 22. A step paused right outside the door. I could feel a presence, a coldness seeping through the steel. 23. The step moved on. 28, 29, 30. I opened my eyes, lunged for the spotlight on the desk, and pointed it at the high southern window. I thumbed the switch. The beam illuminated the wire-reinforced glass. Pressed against the outside was a face. It was pale, elongated. It had no eyes, just smooth, dark sockets. Its mouth was open in a silent oval. It was not the face from the woods. It was different, older. I held the beam for 5 seconds. The face did not move. It did not blink. It just was. I turned the light off. The afterimage burned, the empty sockets, the silent scream. The footsteps began again. I closed my eyes. 1, 2, 3. I repeated the cycle for what felt like an eternity. Count to 30. Light the window. See a variation. A hand with too many fingers splayed against the glass. A dark, shaggy shape that resolved into fur, but with a human posture. The empty-eyed face again. Each time, the 5-second exposure. Each time, the light off. The circle resumed. On the hour, at 3 a.m., I felt the pressure build. The footsteps became more insistent. The pauses longer. The cold in the shed deepened. I could see my breath in a sliver of moonlight from the window. I judged the hour by the ache in my bones. I picked up the air horn, pointed it at the door, and pressed the trigger. The blast was apocalyptic in the confined, silent space. It felt like it punched a hole in the night. The footsteps stopped. The pressure eased just for a moment. Then they began again. Slower, angrier. 1, 2, 3. I lost count of how many circles I counted. My mind frayed at the edges, held together only by the numbers. 30. Light. 5 seconds. Off. Count. Sometime after 4 a.m., a new sound. A tapping. Not on the door, on the roof. A light, skittering tap, like pebbles. Then a heavier thump, as if something had landed. Then another. They were on the roof. The circle protocol said nothing about the roof. I kept counting the footsteps. 27, 28. The tapping on the roof multiplied, a chaotic percussion now. 29, 30. I shone the light at the window. Nothing was there. The glass was clear. I swung the beam upward toward the ceiling. The shed had no internal ceiling. It was just the corrugated metal roof. I saw nothing, but the tapping intensified, frantic, like 100 frantic fingers. I turned the light off. The darkness was now alive with sound from above and around. I broke sound discipline. I whispered, "Stop." Everything stopped. The footsteps, the tapping, the pervasive, listening silence returned. It was worse than a single clear voice from the radio speaker, though the volume was at 0. It was Leo S.'s voice, terrified. John, let me in. It has got me. Please, it's right behind." I ripped the power cord from the back of the console. The lights died. The shed was in total, absolute blackness. I sat there in the dark, the air horn in one hand, the empty spotlight in the other, for the final 2 hours, until the first gray hint of dawn bled through the windows. I did not move. I did not make a sound. The siege lifted with the light. The temperature in the shed normalized. The sense of dreadful presence faded. At 6 a.m., I heard the familiar rumble of Dern's truck. I peeled the salt line from the floor, swept the granules into a dustpan, and dumped them in the trash. I removed the tape from the supply locker. It was still open. Inside, everything was as it should be. 4 gallons of water, 12 flares, the medical kit. The salt container was empty. I logged it as used during the night. I did not reseal the locker. I left it open. Dern entered. He saw the open locker, the unplugged radio, the bags under my eyes. He said nothing. He inspected the door, the windows. He checked the logbook, where I had written in a steady hand. 4 a.m., broadcast not performed due to equipment malfunction. All other protocols observed. He grunted. We had a repeater tower go down, took out comms for the whole sector. He looked at me. You held. It was in praise. It was a fact. The locker I started. It does that sometimes, he said, closing it with a click. The lock engaged. When the pressure drops. He handed me a new container of salt from his truck. He also gave me a new sheet of paper. No amendments this time. Just a single handwritten note for the next one. Rule 15. After a blackout siege, the first person to relieve you will not be me. They will look like me, sound like me, but will get a detail wrong. Ask them what color my daughter Spike was. If they answer blue, do not get in the truck. Wait for the next one. The correct answer is red. She never had a blue bike. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. I got in Dern's truck. He drove me out in silence. When we reached the district office, I asked as casually as I could, "How is your daughter? Still riding that bike?" He glanced at me, a flicker of understanding in his stone-colored eyes. Wrecked it last month. Bent the front wheel all to hell. It was red. He paused. Like I told you. I nodded. We didn't speak of it again. My time at White Oak Shed ended a month later. My debt was paid down enough to move on to a town job processing permits. On my last shift, I performed every ritual with a somber finality. 52 paces. The spotlight at 1:15 a.m. showed only trees. The maintenance patrol passed at 11, 2 sets of footsteps, a glimpse of red stripes. The night was quiet. A safe night. At 4 a.m., I broadcast. The single click came back. In the dawn light, I cleaned the shed until it was spotless. I refilled the logbook with boilerplate entries for the next week, and I left a new, cleanly typed sheet of paper on top of the binder. I had compiled the core rules, the amendments, and the emergency protocols into one coherent list. I had added Rule 15 at the end. I did not sign it. I locked the door with a heavy brass key for the last time. I placed the key in the lockbox at the trailhead. I did not look back at the shed, a gray smudge in the green gloom. I knew it was waiting, not for me anymore, for the next one. Someone with debts or secrets, or a need for the kind of silence that only a place like that can provide. The Ferris swallowed the road behind me. In my pocket, my hand closed around a single, coarse grain of salt I'd dismissed when sweeping up. I kept it, a souvenir, a reminder. The rules are real, and someone else will have to learn them now. It was the flat, gray light of a Smokies autumn afternoon when Dern found me at the district office, collating trail maintenance reports. I'd been off the night shift for 6 weeks. The dreams had mostly stopped. The jump at sudden noises was down to a manageable flinch. I was getting good at pretending to be normal. "Got a minute?" he rasped. He didn't wait for an answer, just turned and walked toward the equipment bay. I followed. In the dim, oily-smelling bay, he leaned against a stack of tire chains. "It's about your replacement. Kid named Eli." I remembered. Young, quiet, a geology major. I'd given him a truncated handoff, sticking to the radio frequencies and weather patterns. I'd pointed him to the binder. I'd said, "The rules are important." He'd nodded, serious. He hadn't asked why. "He's gone," Dern said. His face was all deep-cut shadows. "Gone? Didn't come out for his shift change yesterday. Truck's still at the trailhead. Went in for a look. Dern's jaw worked. Sheet is empty. Logbook is gone. So's the binder." A cold knot formed in my gut. The rules, gone. All of it. Just the console and the cot. And this. He pulled a small, spiral-bound field notebook from his jacket. It was the kind we all carried for quick jottings. He handed it to me. Eli's handwriting was neat, precise. The first few pages were normal. Soil sample locations, rock-type notations, weather observations. Then, about a third of the way in, the entries changed. Oct 12, Night 3, heard the crying. Fisher cat, did not investigate. Per Rule 8, Oct 14, Night 5, spotlight at 1:15, counted 48 paces at midnight. Broadcast perimeter compression, Stage 1, no response. Oct 16, Night 7, maintenance patrol passed. Only saw one jacket, no red stripe. Did not implement Rule 10. Uncertain. May have been a trick of the light. My throat tightened. He'd hesitated. That's all it took. The next entry was 2 days later. Oct 18. The map is wrong. The display is right. I checked. There is a new stream. It wasn't there last week. It flows into the draw. I can hear it from the north window. It sounds inviting. Rule 9 says ignore the display. But the display is real time. The paper map is decades old. How can the map be correct if the land changes? He was questioning the foundational logic. The binder's authority was crumbling in his hands. Oct 19. I went to measure, just to the edge. The new stream is 15 paces north of the latrine path. Clear water, stones. It's beautiful. It doesn't belong on the map, so it doesn't exist. That's not science. That's dogma. He'd broken a threshold. He'd gone to a place not on the map. The entries became sparse, the handwriting more agitated. Oct 20, the voice on channel 2 at 3 a.m. It knew my mother's name, her maiden name. No one knows that. I didn't answer, but I listened. Oct 21, the supply locker was open this morning. I didn't leave it open. The salt was low. I didn't use it. I refilled it from the spare. I did not log the discrepancy. What's the point? No one else listening. The final entry was dated 3 nights ago. Oct 22. I can trust the rules if I can trust the map. A landmark that exists cannot be ignored. I am going to chart the new stream, just to its source, just to understand. I'll take the radio. I'll be back before dawn. If the map is wrong about this, what else is it wrong about? Maybe the draw isn't what they say. Maybe the rules are for something else. Maybe they're not to keep it out. Maybe they're to keep us from seeing what is really in there. The pages after that were blank. I looked up at Dern. He went into the draw. Whisper draw, Dern confirmed, his voice hollow. We found his boot print at the head of the ravine. The ground, it was soft, like it had just opened up. No sign of him, no sign of a struggle. He paused. We recovered his pack, 50 yards in. The radio was inside, switched off. The logbook and the binder weren't there. The implications hung in the air, heavier than the tire chains. The rules were loose. They were out, there, in the woods, in a place where the rules didn't apply. Or worse, they were being read by something that now knew exactly what they were. You're the last one who knows, Dern said. The full set, before Eli. I need you to write it down, everything. The core rules, the amendments, the emergency protocols. Everything you remember. Don T. editorialize, just the procedures. Why? The word came out sharper than I intended. So you can give it to another kid to get chewed up? So the next one has a fighting chance, Dern said, his eyes holding mine. The shed can just stay empty. You know that. The silence needs a keeper. The rules need a voice. Or it gets curious. It starts to come out looking for one. I thought of the thing on the roof, the face at the window, the voice of my sister. It was a containment system. I was a valve. Eli had been a valve. Someone had to turn the pressure. I took a deep breath, the smell of grease and pine needles filling my lungs. I'll need to go back, one last time, to remember it right. The distances, the timing. I can do it from memory in an office. Dern studied me for a long moment, then gave a single, slow nod. One night, observer status only. I'll have Jess cover the console. You just watch, and you write. In and out, at dawn. The following evening, I stood once more before the white oak shed. The key was the same, but heavier. Jess, a veteran dispatcher from another sector, was already inside, setting up. She was a stout, no-nonsense woman in her 50s who smelled of coffee and wool. She nodded at me, but didn't smile. Dern briefed me, she said. You're the ghost. Don't touch anything. Don't speak after 7 p.m. unless it is to me, in a whisper. Your cot is there. You observe. You write. I placed my blank notebook and 3 pens on the small folding table next to the cot. The shed was exactly as I remembered, yet every familiar detail felt charged, like a trap waiting to be sprung. The wire mesh windows were eyes. The console was an altar. At 7 p.m., Jess gave the check-in. The double click came back, strong and clear. She logged it meticulously. The night began. It was a quiet night, deceptively so. Jess moved through the rituals with the bored competence of a lifelong bureaucrat. She counted the paces at 8 p.m., 52. She monitored the channels, ignoring the occasional burst of static or fragmented, unnamed voice. At 1:15 a.m., she performed the spotlight scan, her lips moving in a silent countdown. The beam revealed nothing but the silent waiting trees. I wrote. I started with the core rules, reconstructing them from the deep, scarred memory of muscle and fear. 1. Upon arrival, inventory. I wrote the exact list, the exact quantities. 2. At 7 p.m., sharp, I wrote the phrases verbatim. I was halfway through Rule 7 when I felt it. A change in the air. Not a sound, but a settling, a focusing of attention. Jess felt it too. She paused, her pen hovering over the logbook. She looked at the south window, then at me. Her expression was no longer bored. It was wary. On channel 5, the green receive light flickered. No sound came through the speaker Jess had set to low, but the light pulsed once, twice. Then the pressure plate LED for the north path lit up. A steady green. Jess's eyes went to it, then to the supply locker. It was closed, locked. She slowly got up, went to the salt container, and placed her hand on it. A precaution. That S, when the first knock came. Not on the door, on the north wall. A single, polite tap, tap, tap. Jess froze. Rule 6 stated the patrol wouldn't knock. This was wrong. Tap, tap, tap. It came again, slightly lower down. I looked at my notebook. I had just written Rule 10. Any person claiming to be a lost hiker. A voice filtered through the wall. It was Eli's voice. Young, earnest, scared. Hello? Is someone in there? It asked Eli. I got turned around. I can find the path. Jess's face went pale. She knew about Eli. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a silent question. I gave a sharp, minute shake of my head. No. Please, Eli's voice pleaded, closer now, as if his mouth was pressed to the cinder block. It's so dark. I'm sorry I took the book. I have it. I just want to come in. He had the binder. The thought was a lance of ice. The entity outside had the rules. It was using them, weaponizing them. Jess, to her immense credit, did not answer. She closed her eyes for a second, steadying herself. Then she walked to the door, not to open it, but to stand before it. She spoke, her voice firm, directing her words at the steel. You are not cleared for this frequency. It was the amendment, the one for personal auditory hallucinations. She was adapting, silence from outside. Then a new sound, a rustling, paper, right outside the door. The distinct sound of pages being turned. A calm, conversational voice, one I had never heard before. A pleasant, middle-aged man's voice spoke. Rule 8, it said. All recorded cries are fisher cats, without exception. There was a pause, the rustle of paper. But what if it's not recorded? What if it's live? And then it mimicked the crying, the infant-like wail of a fisher cat. But it was perfect, heartbreaking, and it was coming from right outside the door. Jess clenched her fists. She knew it was a test, a brutal, cruel test of her adherence to the letter of the law. Rule 8 said, do not investigate. It didn't say anything about not responding to a direct query. The crying intensified, now mixed with a soft, gurgling sob. Jess turned her back to the door. She walked to the console and, with a trembling hand, turned up the volume on the channel static. A hiss filled the shed, drowning out the sound from outside. The crying stopped instantly. The man's voice returned, now with a hint of academic curiosity. Amendment 4, a reduction of more than 3 paces. What constitutes the original 52 paces? Is it an absolute measurement or a measurement relative to a fixed point? If the shed itself were to be misaligned, would the rules still hold? I heard it then, a low, grating sound, stone on stone, from beneath the shed. A shudder went through the floor, subtle but unmistakable. The coffee in Jess's mug rippled. It was testing the geometry, trying to break the logic. Jess sank into her chair, her breathing shallow. She was a procedural dispatcher, not a philosopher. This was an attack on the framework itself. The voice continued, its tone almost friendly. And whisper draw, the blanket term. Any communication that seems to originate from a low-lying area. Seems to is a fascinating qualifier, so subjective. Who decides what it seems to be? You or me? On the console, the topographic display flickered. A new, jagged blue line appeared, snaking from the north directly toward the shed S icon. A stream. Eli S. Stream. It terminated right at our location. The paper map on the wall showed nothing. "The map is wrong," the voice whispered, now from the south window. I could see a dark shape blotting out the faint starlight. "The display is right." He understood that. "Come and see." Jess was shaking. She was at her breaking point. The entity wasn't just making noise. It was conducting a sophisticated, horrifying seminar on the loopholes in our survival. I acted. I broke my observer status. I stood up, went to the supply locker, and broke the tape seal Jess had applied at the start of her shift. I ignored her shocked look. I took out the air horn and the container of salt. I walked to the center of the room. I poured a thick circle of salt on the concrete floor, large enough for both of us to stand in. I beckoned to Jess. After a terrified second, she stumbled into the circle with me. I faced the door, the air horn in my hand. I did not use the standard phrase. I used the only logic I thought it might respect, the logic of the siege. I shouted, my voice raw. "You have the book. You know the rules. Then you know this. We are inside the circle now. The shed is secondary. This is the perimeter, and you are not cleared to cross it." Absolute silence. The green pressure plate light went out. The topographic display flickered and reset, showing the standard, streamless terrain. The sense of immediate, pressing presence withdrew. It had worked, not by reciting a rule, but by inventing a new one on the spot, using its own stolen tools. I had declared a smaller, absolute sovereignty within the sovereign space. It had respected the precedent. Jess slid down to sit on the floor inside the salt ring, hugging her knees. I remained standing, the air horn ready, until the first gray light touched the high windows. At dawn, Jess was a shell. She packed her gear without a word and left in Dern's truck, refusing to even look back at the shed. I stayed behind to finish my work. In the cold morning light, I completed the document. I wrote down every rule, every amendment, every protocol. I added a new section at the end, not numbered, titled Observations on Adaptive Engagement. I detailed the event of the previous night. I explained that the rules were not just procedures, but a language, a negotiation, that the entity understood their boundaries and would probe for weakness in their definitions. That survival sometimes required redefining the perimeter in real time, with absolute conviction. I ended with a final, unnumbered note. The binder is compromised. Assume any copy not in this shed is a corrupted text. The entity understands irony. It may follow the rules perfectly to violate their intent. The goal is not to outsmart it. The goal is to be more consistent than reality. The map is not the territory. The rule is. Make the rule the territory. I placed the completed notebook in the middle of the desk. I put a fresh roll of duct tape and a full container of salt on top of it. I left the shed unlocked. I walked the 52 paces to the southern tree line one final time. I didn't count. I just walked. At the edge, where the shadows were deepest, I saw something white caught on a thorn branch, a page of paper soaked with dew. I carefully pulled it free. It was a page from the original binder. Rule 14, never, under any circumstances, go into the ravine marked on the map as whisper draw. Written neatly in the margin in Eli S. hand was a single damning addendum. Why? I let the page fall. It fluttered to the damp earth and lay there, a white scar on the forest floor. I turned and walked away, back to the world of trucks and permits and gray afternoon light, leaving the silence and the rules and the thing that studied them behind. For the next one,